Hi, everybody. This is Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for joining me once again, and this time I've got kind of a novel story for you. Not about the glory of racing or some landmark sports car, but instead a sign of the times. The manual gearbox has sadly been slipping away from us for decades, and the recent cry, at least in the last 10 years or so, has been save the manuals, right? You've all seen the decals and the t-shirts and all that. But fewer and fewer people actually know how to operate a clutch and a gear shift, and that's where today's guest comes in. Ahmed Raza is the founder of the Manual Driving Academy, a network of local instructors that teach people how to drive a proper car. And he's got operations all over the United States at this point. Ahmed is sort of an accidental car enthusiast, as you'll hear, and he's doing his part to keep these basic driving skills alive, which I think we can all appreciate. And if you enjoy Horsepower Heritage, leave me 5 stars and a quick review on your podcast app of choice, and consider supporting the show with a donation. Go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage, where you can pitch a few bucks in the gas tank. And thank you to those of you who've already supported the show. I really appreciate it. One more note, a lot of good stuff is coming to the Horsepower Heritage YouTube channel. And frankly, I'm working like a rented mule right now to edit a bunch of projects. It's pretty much nonstop, but that's okay. It's a good problem to have. So give me a sub over on YouTube, because I'm trying to build an empire over there and bringing you great stories and great cars you probably won't find elsewhere. Also, I really appreciate everyone watching my behind-the-scenes interview with Ben Bertucci and So Naito about Ben's new film, One of One, which is the story of Naito engineering. I know you're going to love the film. It's available now on Prime Video and Apple TV Plus in the USA. And if you're listening from Europe or Asia, I think it'll be available sometime this month. But watch my conversation with Ben and So on YouTube about the making of the film. And I think you'll see that's a good way to get into the story before you watch the actual film. All right, enough promos and plugs for now. Here's my conversation with Ahmed Raza of the Manual Driving Academy. Enjoy. All right, first things first, Ahmed. We've got to talk about Miatas. You're a kind of a Miata freak, aren't you?
Yeah, no, the first car that I got into that was a stick shift was a manual Miata. So it was the NC, so the third generation. I think it was like a 2012. Yeah, it was the quintessential. I bought it off the lot, did not know how to drive stick, brought it home from the dealership. Not something I generally recommend, honestly, in hindsight, but it turned out okay. But yeah, that car was so much fun, man. I think I bought it right when it was getting pretty cool in Houston. So, everywhere else in the country, everyone focuses on getting their drop tops during the summer. We don't in Houston. We put them away for the summer because it's too hot. But yeah, I got it somewhere in time in like October, November. Yeah, it was a blast. And that's the car that I feel like I both fell in love with driving manual, but then also fell in love with the process of teaching people, because I brought it home, learned to drive stick on it, and then told all my friends, all right, we're all going to meet up in a parking lot, and I'm going to teach you all how to drive this thing. And so it was a good time. I had like 5-6 people show up, and we all spent a couple hours just learning. So yeah, it was fun.
So you were learning with your friends on your brand new car.
Yeah, so it was very much the blind leading the blind situation. But we had fun. It wasn't brand new though, so I think it was a used one. So
okay.
I didn't feel, if it was brand new, I think it would have been a little bit more cautious. But it wasn't a beater, but it was definitely used, so it worked out nicely.
But now, how did you even get it off the dealer lot?
Lots of YouTube videos. Yeah, so I was just
all right. So you basically swung for the fences. You were able to get it away and to a safe location where you guys could all play with it.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I did was the dealership was like 10-15 minutes from me, so it wasn't too bad. I took all the back roads, stuff like that. So I drove it home, kind of spent a couple hours, and then I was like, okay, I know what we're doing tonight, guys. We're all meeting up, and I'm going to show you all how to drive this thing that I just learned to drive as well. So yeah. And then I remember when I was leaving off the lot, I was just like, oh, I hope this YouTube training these videos come in handy, because I don't want them to see me stalling right as I'm getting off the lot. That'll be embarrassing. So that was the first objective. that worked out okay. Everything else was just, bonus on top.
I mean, I remember learning to drive a stick, and it's a skill like riding a bicycle that you will never lose.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the coolest thing is that even I've went. I mean, at this point, this learning was quite a few years ago, and so I've went like a year in between of never driving a stick. Hopped in a car and just I kind of came back. So you're absolutely right. It's
Yeah.
something that doesn't just like go away once you learn it.
All right, so you mentioned Houston. You're down there in the Republic of Texas, and Houston's got a pretty vibrant car culture, does it not?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's like I've been to a couple of like the cars and coffee meets here as well. And just like I think there are a lot of like the underground car meets as well. Not so underground, but like the ones that people just host because they kind of want to go more, show off their JDMs. And then there's like the Euro car meets, things like that. So I think it's a pretty solid, vibrant car culture. And interestingly enough, it even differentiates as you get into like different parts of Houston because Houston's massive. And so like as you get into like, like even outside in the greater area of Katy, like you might see more like JDM car meets out there, whereas in other parts you might see more Euro car meets. So yeah, it's definitely a vibrant car culture.
Are you sort of an accidental car guy? I mean, like when you were a little kid, cars weren't really much of a thing for you, were they?
That's a great question. And I would say I definitely am. And I think what happened was that, it was one of those things where as much as most guys are, I was into cars, right? I was like, oh, I like nice cars, right? Kind of like how, a lot of people might be into watches, things like that. So it wasn't anything that I was like super geeked about. But then I think that's what changed with like a lot of, with the Miata, right? So I got that. And then I started just watching a lot of like car YouTubers, car videos, reviews. And I was like, oh, these are fascinating. And so, I think definitely stumbling upon it was how it occurred. And for me it was interesting because it was never one of those things where I was like, oh, like I can't wait till I'm 18 so I can drive stick shift. For many years it was never a thing. I mean, I could care less, like most people, and they grow up in the US and Canada. It's like it wasn't part of our day-to-day lives. But then I think that's what like changed for me with that Miata. And for me it's like getting good at it, getting used to it, I finally started to see what it was all about. And I was like, oh, this is fun. And I think, on a broader level, I feel like a lot of people today feel kind of disconnected with a lot of the things they own. And it was a way to just feel reconnected again. Not to make it deeper than it is, but at least for me, that was kind of how I felt. I was like, oh, cool. Like I'm actually in control of this vehicle. Like I'm actually the one that's driving it. I'm shifting gears. And I don't know, there was something that kind of switched in my head when that happened, and I was like, oh, this is actually really fascinating. And so that's where it all started for me, which was really just like maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. So it wasn't that long ago either.
Yeah, I don't think you're overthinking it, by the way. Cars, I mean, we spend so much time in our cars. They become a personal reflection of us in a lot of ways. I mean, even if somebody's just driving some Econobox, they've usually got something hanging from the rearview mirror or bumper stickers or something that, some little flourish, some piece of flair, right? That sort of is about their personality. And I mean, I know people who have super boring cars who have nicknamed their cars that they say, oh, this is my baby. It's not a special car, objectively, but it is to them. So, and Miatas are so much fun. I remember I had a friend in college who had a first gen Miata. And when I drove that car, at the time, it was the smallest car I've ever driven. And I remember feeling kind of unsafe in traffic because you're so low, it's so tiny, everything's towering over you. You could practically go under a pickup truck, but really fun to drive, very responsive, super easy to shift and steer. And the Miata, of course, is an homage to the great British sports cars of the 50s and 60s. That was sort of the idea behind it. Super successful and great community of Miata owners out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, yeah, that's exactly what appealed to me. And it's interesting you say that with like the pickup truck analogy, right? Because being in Houston, I mean, every other person owns a pickup truck. And I think that was, I remember once
I've seen Landman. I know what you guys drive down there.
Yeah. And it's like, I remember I was at a friend's place once and he had a pickup truck and I had parked my Miata behind his pickup truck. And so he gets in the car and he's like, you're not going to believe this. And I'm like, what? So he's like, when I put my car in reverse and the backup camera pops up, I just can't see your car. Like it's
Right.
invisible. And I was like, oh, well, new fear unlocked. That's kind of a scary thing.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Well, you obviously have grown to love cars. You taught yourself how to drive a manual together with your friends on this Miata, but how do you get an idea that this could actually be a business? You're an entrepreneurial guy, we should say. So maybe you're always thinking about the next thing.
Yeah, no, I think this was one of those things where, so when I taught my friends, I was like, okay, cool. I really liked this experience. And I think the most satisfying thing, it was, seeing them come in with no idea what a stick shift was and leaving. I'm not going to say with any level of perfection, but with some level of competency, right? Like they could drive it around in the parking lot, they could shift gears. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. It was fun to do. I think I just enjoyed teaching as a whole. And so what I ended up, I was like, okay, I think it would be cool to just teach people in the city I'm in, right? Like I have this car, let me just teach people in Houston. Nothing as like a full-time gig or anything like that. I was already, I've had my full-time thing. I was like, this would be just fun to get out of the house. Everything I've ever done has been on a computer. And so I was like, oh, cool. This would be a good way to just get out of the house, teach people. It's a gratifying experience. So I just put together a website and I was like, okay, cool. Like if anyone wants to learn in Houston, they can just book a time with me and, we'll go from there. Turns out quite a few people wanted to learn and we got quite a bit of interest. And so yeah, and then I had a buddy of mine that was also into cars. He was entrepreneurial, and I was like, okay, well, if you want, we can build this together. I am pretty, I have my full-time work, and so pretty busy with that. You do too, and so together we can take parts of our time and build this together. And he was like, all right, let's do it. And so that's kind of where it started. And yeah, here we are, 47, 48 cities later, and we've been doing it for the last 2 years.
I mean, it sounds like you're having fun, and I've taught people how to drive a stick, including my own kids. When they get it, their faces light up. When they finally achieve like a skillful evolution of operations from starting to stopping and engine braking and feathering the clutch and all that, it's fun to watch somebody discover all that.
You're exactly right. Like seeing them get it in real time is it's so fascinating and it's so gratifying. But I think that even carries on for people that have already learned and want to keep driving themselves, right? Because what's interesting is like when you're driving an automatic car, it's not like you're just driving, right? But then when you're driving a manual, it's like some days you'll be like, wow, like you're just driving, like, wow, I shifted that perfectly. Like, oh, like you don't get these little wins by just driving an automatic car. And I think that's the biggest thing I always tell folks is that every little like drive is like a slightly different experience, right? You're like there are the days where the opposite is true too, right? Like I'll like shift and I'll be like, wow, that was terrible. What's wrong with me today, right? So it's like it's just these little fun like wins you have as part of like the overall driving experience. And I always say like it even makes you a better driver, even as an automatic driver. And I think that's something people generally agree on because it's like you're just more alert. You're obviously not on your phone most likely if you're driving stick shift, so that's just better as a whole. Like you kind of learn to watch stoplights a little bit more. Like, okay, when am I gonna? You're more aware, things like that. So I tell students this all the time when I'm teaching. I'm like, hey, this is something that's pretty easy to learn, reasonably easy to learn, but it's difficult to master, right? Which is a good thing because as time goes on, you'll realize, wow, what I was doing 2 years ago, I'm like so much better at it now. Like to the average person, it wouldn't mean much, but to you, it means a lot because it's like it's a skill you're now mastering as time goes on.
Well, and there are little details that if you don't teach them, eventually it will result in a mechanical failure. Like one example would be, I remember telling my daughter, do not hold the clutch pedal to the floor at a stoplight. You're going to destroy the throwout bearing. Then we're going to have to pull the transmission and it's going to cost money. Things like that. Do you teach mechanical theory and like do you break down the different parts of a manual gearbox, the clutch, all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do to a degree, where we'll obviously explain like how the clutch disconnects, the flywheel, all that stuff. And so we'll go into it on a general level. I think it's one of those things where we're also mindful of how practical it is in the sense that
Sure.
The last thing we want is like if someone's a lot of like one of the use cases we see a lot is like, hey, I'm going to Europe for a vacation. I want to, rent a manual. they're not super duper concerned about like, theory at that point, but we do as much as it needs to be done. We will like kind of go through best practices, things like that. But I think we also tailor it to the student. If we have someone that's like, hey, I actually would really like to learn more of this. Absolutely. Right. But it's like
Yeah.
most students, or at least maybe half the students or so, are more just worried about like the practical aspect. So we'll do that. But then, yeah, I think kind of balancing that becomes pretty important for us.
Definitely. I mean, a little goes a long way in terms of mechanical theory. I read somewhere that about 25% of the licensed drivers in the United States know how to operate a stick shift. I don't know how reliable that statistic is. One thing we do know for sure is people under 40, most do not know how to drive a manual.
No, I was just like, yeah, I think even that 1 in 4, that's interesting because I would have guessed a lot less, but that also probably takes into account a holistic demographic, right? So I think once you start looking, exactly what you were getting at was that was my next thought, was like when you said under 40, I was like, okay, I assume that number drops significantly under 40.
A few years ago, I have to tell you this story. I was asked by a guy who was trying to break into acting and the stunt world in Hollywood to teach him how to drive a stick. And he was trying to impress the director of this film he was going to be in. And I took him out in my Mini Cooper S Clubman, which is a really fun car and actually pretty easy to learn on. We went up in the hills in Malibu, in an area that's where the streets are pretty wide and, it's hilly, but it's not twisty 2-lane road. It was more of a residential area. And after about half an hour, he got it. He stalled it a couple times. There was a little bit of lugging on the hills. Like the downshifting was one of the skills that we worked on quite a bit. And I found that it was actually a good place to learn because it gave him a variety of terrain to work on versus just like a flat parking lot. But now your approach has been to go to a big, wide open, flat area, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're saying, so in terms of like those hill starts, I fully agree that it is definitely, it's more realistic to kind of teach people when you actually have that scenario when you're on a hill. For us, it's like, it's managing safety, managing risk. So funny enough, I had someone a couple of weeks ago that I taught, and we went into like the hill start scenario. And the way I do it, I was like, okay, we're going to do the whole handbrake. We're going to put it down. And if there is a lag between when your handbrake goes down and your car starts moving, technically you would have rolled back on the hill, right? So that's that lag that we're trying to perfect. For whatever reason, that like he did excellent up until that point, and then that part just got him, right? And he was just like, and it's one of those things I'm sure you've seen where it's like when someone stops getting it, they just stop getting it, and it takes a couple times to just get out of their head about it. And it's like, I was like, it's okay, we're gonna keep working through it. It's not a big deal. I think we went through it like 25, 30 times, and he just either he would stall, or it would just be too much of a lag, where I was like, yeah, if you were on a hill, there's no, you would have 100% rolled back. So I can only imagine now if we were really on a hill trying that, that would have been a very not as fun of an outcome. So I think, yeah, that's the biggest thing, is that we try our best to make sure that we replicate all these scenarios, but in a way that's safe. So hill starts come to mind, even stop and go comes to mind. Like if you were in stop and go traffic, what if you were coming to a red light, you were about to stop and that red light turned green? You can't just now stop and restart from first, right? Because there's people behind you in a real world scenario. So we do all of those like different scenarios. Naturally, they're not going to be as good as like, hey, if you were in the real world doing it, but at the same time, the goal there is to get 90% of the way there with like maybe 5% of the risk.
Hi guys, Maurice Merrick here, and I want to tell you about this amazing event, the Slow Baja Vintage Expedition, October 11th through the 18th, Ensenada to Ensenada. You know my pal Michael Emery of the Slow Baja podcast? He's been on the show before. Michael does such a great job at Slow Baja. I was on the trip last fall, and it was epic. That word is used a lot now, but I guarantee it fits here. It's non-competitive, leisurely travel through an unforgettable landscape, and you'll be in the company of some of the best people you'll ever meet. If you've got an old Bronco or a Myers-Manx or Toyota FJ, if it's got four-wheel drive and it's 30 years old or looks 30 years old or it's just flat out cool, you should be doing the Slow Baja Vintage Expedition. I know some of you guys have an old 4x4 sitting next to that 911 in your garage. You've got to join us. And this year is a special tribute. It's the 50th anniversary celebration of Sal Fish's first Baja 1000. Sal is a Baja legend. We're going to drive the best legs of his original route. Sal is going to be on the trip pouring Fortaleza tequila for everyone. We've got Kurt LeDuc, Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Famer, trophy truck driver, and Kurt's coming along as the mechanic. So that opens up the trip to you Jeep guys, you Scout guys, even us Land Rover guys. Michael and his team take care of all the details. It's all inclusive, 3 meals a day. In fact, I guarantee you'll eat better in Baja than you would at home. Primo camping along the way, and a hotel for the last night where you wash away that trail dust, but the memories are going to stay with you forever. So don't miss it. October 11th through the 18th, Ensenada to Ensenada. Go to slowbaja.com/adventures. There's a link in the show notes, but space is limited. So go to slowbaja.com/adventures today and join us on the Slow Baja Vintage Expedition. All right, so the idea of expanding this to different cities, how did you approach that? Obviously, you have to find instructors in those places.
Yeah, and I think that was funny enough. Initially we thought the challenge was going to be finding enough students and making the business viable. It turns out the hard part was finding enough instructors, and I think a lot of it was like people just don't own stick shifters. They just don't own these vehicles. Even the ones like we have a lot that are like, well, I know how to drive stick, but I don't actively own a stick shift vehicle, right? And I think that becomes, like a qualifying factor as well. So that is still probably the biggest challenge, just like finding enough instructors and a reliable fleet of instructors in various cities. For whatever reason, some cities are easier than others. So we started, obviously, we did the approach of like using job posting boards, things like that, just, like general things like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, stuff like that. And then we started posting in different communities, car communities, things like that, where we felt like a lot of these folks that might be interested in teaching would be there. And the pitch there was really that, hey, this isn't meant to be like a full-time or a part-time job. It's more than anything meant to be like something you do on the side that pays reasonably well and you enjoy doing, right? And so that was kind of the general pitch. And overall, it's worked out well. I think it's just one of those things where maintaining that standard of quality across the board is what's tough, right? Because you're not physically located in any of these locations anymore. Whereas when we were in Houston, we're like, okay, we are in Houston. But now being from east to west coast, it's like, okay, well, how do we maintain this level, the standard of quality that we want and our students expect, while still expanding into these different areas? And that's been the biggest challenge.
And I imagine too, you've had to really think about vetting your instructors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the ways we combat that, of course, is like background checks, driver's license checks, things like that. And then making sure we're having proper conversations, we're having onboarding calls with all of our instructors. And it's, from a business perspective, it's a little challenging to do that when you're pitching it as like a gig thing, right? You're like, okay, well, this is something you'll do on the side. It's not like a full-time job or a part-time job that people are more willing to put that upfront time in. So I think it's like playing that balancing act of making sure that we're vetting, we're getting quality instructors, but then also, making sure we're not asking for too much from these instructors before they've even had a chance to really teach a lesson or really be compensated in any form from it. So we kind of make sure we try to find a middle ground there.
Yeah, because in a sense, you're asking a lot of a person who's basically doing some gig work. It's not a big windfall for them. But I would argue that probably means that the people who follow through with you and go through your process are really enthusiastic about it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think that's one of the reasons where sometimes we'll talk internally like, hey, if we didn't have all of these hoops to jump through, we might onboard more instructors. We might have a bigger fleet. But then it's like, well, then the quality of instructors might depreciate a little bit, right? So that's exactly right. Where it's like, yeah, you feel strongly, and we see that a lot with like the instructor interactions with students, right? Like you can see like the ones that that are really enthusiastic are the ones that, when we kind of refine this process to make it more thorough, to make it more rigorous, we saw like that quality of instructors increase, and just the enthusiasm of instructors increase as well.
Oh, that's good. Now, do you have a certain type of vehicle that you would like your instructors? I mean, it's different learning a manual on a big Dodge dually diesel pickup versus, say, a Honda Civic, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And most of our instructors, and most of our students generally want to learn on just, like general cars, right? Like a Honda Civic Si, or, like a Subaru WRX even, any of these general vehicles. And so that's what most of our instructors have. If they have something that's a little bit less common, obviously we keep a running tally of like what everyone has as a vehicle, all of our instructors, what they teach in, whether it's a 5-speed, a 6-speed, what year. And then that way, if a student has like a particular request, we'll see if we can fulfill that. But usually it's like, hey, I just want to learn. And the funniest thing, the most general and the funniest way most students will say is like, I just don't want to learn on anything weird, right? Like I just want to learn on
Right.
something that like if I learn on this, it'll translate. And they're aware that, hey, every manual car type is a little different, but it's like, okay, as long as what I learned here will roughly translate over, and obviously I'll have some adjustment period, that's fine. And as someone, I'm sure that you can attest to this as well. If you've driven a bunch of different manual cars, even if they are different, they have different bite points, things like that. As long as you have a solid foundation, like I've definitely jumped into random manual cars where I'm like, oh, this is very different than anything I've driven, but I have no problem with it because it's like there were good fundamentals in place. So I think that that's like the general goal for it.
Yeah, I mean, I have two vehicles that one of which has no synchronizers in the gearbox. It's a crash box transmission. You have to double clutch in every gear, up and down. And another one has no synchros on first and second gear, so you have to double clutch there, but once you're in third and fourth, you're good. But the small Japanese econobox type car or mild sporty Japanese car is like the perfect platform for this because they're super forgiving. They're lightweight. The clutch weight is not terrible. They shift easily. So yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, and it's funny you say that with the double clutching. I don't think I've had anyone ever request that. So
You won't.
that's funny you mentioned it. Yeah, I'm like,
I'm
but if it
I'm
ever
just
came
weird.
to it, that would be yeah. I've tried it a couple of times myself, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting thing to do. I've never actually had to do it. It's the whole thing we talked about, like real world versus simulation. I was like, okay, I'll simulate it if I ever need to. I don't know if I'd ever need to, but if I ever do, I'd know how to. But yeah, that's a fun little, yeah. If it ever happens though, if someone requests it, I'll be sure to give you a shout and let you know if someone finally requested
Oh,
this.
please do. Yeah. It'll be a
Yeah.
cold day in hell before that happens. But Ahmed, if you're ever in Southern California, you just let me know and we'll go out in one of my cars and you can experience that for yourself. It's odd when you first, attempt it, and it really takes good feel and technique to master for sure. Ahmed, have you had parents contact you on the website and say, hey, can you teach my kid how to drive a stick?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty common use case. Yeah, so a lot of times it's parents that are like, okay, my kid knows how to drive. They just got their driver's license, but I'd love for them to learn to drive stick. Some of the reasons I hear is that, hey, like we have older cars, or like we have cars that either from an economical perspective that like they should be able to drive all the cars in the household. And then the cooler ones, or the cooler scenarios we've run into as well, is like we've had parents reach out like, hey, I have a whole car collection, right, of like older cars, nice cars that I want my son or my daughter to be able to drive. And so I'd like for them to learn. So yeah, we definitely have parents reach out pretty frequently.
Yeah, it's good to think ahead like that and have that life skill. I mean, for example, if we do end up cloning dinosaurs and they rampage across the country and the only escape means that you have available is a stick, you're going to want that skill.
100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's you say that, and it's such an interesting thought because I think like I talk about this a lot, where it's like in a lot of parts of the world, it really is. They really don't have automatics available as vastly, and I mean like a lot, basically anywhere outside of the U.S. and Canada, right? It's like and I think it would be it would be a strange place to be in, knowing you can drive a car but then not drive this car, right? Because it's like you don't have that's going for me. I think maybe I'm just an over planner, and so I always think I'm like, oh, if I ended up in this country, I also enjoy traveling, so maybe I'm like, okay, if I ended up in this country and my only option was a stick shift, I need to go to the hospital, what would I do, right? So I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, well, I need to learn because I don't want to end up in that scenario. But it really is a life skill, and I think it comes in handy a lot. The interesting thing is, even from like a personal finance perspective, it's like I've thought about this, where it's like if you travel a lot and you go to like Europe, other places a lot, you save a ton of money just knowing how to drive stick, because the prices in automatic cars versus standard are very different in a lot of these places. So yeah, a lot of cool reasons. With the dinosaur cloning one definitely being, I think, at the top 3 for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. And the more manual gearbox cars you drive with their own particular intricacies, like the more confident you become. But this can be a stressful skill. Have you had students just quit?
We haven't had that personally. I've definitely had students get frustrated, right? And I think it's more so that they get frustrated with themselves. And it's kind of what we talked about, where especially when you learn to drive stick, the moment you stall out once, as an instructor, as like the person teaching, you really have to like be the one that instills that confidence back into them, because there's something about a car just shutting down on you because of something you did. Like it just feels so much worse than it is, right? And it's like, especially if they like lug and stall out, like it's like that whole like back and forth, and it does get to people. And I think I haven't ever had someone quit. I don't think we've ever had someone like an instructor say, oh, like my student just was like, no, this isn't for me. But I think there are times where they get frustrated or they get in their head, and I think that's where it's like, we'll take a step back, and I'll make jokes and I'm like, oh, like it's okay, these stalls are like your trophies, right? Like you have to earn them, they're a rite of passage. And so I think those are the ones that are the most gratifying too, right? It's like when they get it, it's like, okay, cool, like that means that I did something right as an instructor, and then they actually, it was tough for them, but they saw it through.
Good. You could also up the difficulty. Like you could put a hot cup of coffee on the dashboard and say, you better not spill this.
Yeah, I think that maybe that'll be like a premium feature, right? Like you get the coffee, the coffee in the
challenge unlocked.
Exactly.
Ahmed Raza from the Manual Driving Academy. If you want to be an instructor, or someone who'd like to learn how to drive stick, just go to manualdrivingacademy.com, and I'll have a link in the show notes. Ahmed, thanks for coming on the show. This was fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. Check out the Instagram and the YouTube channel, both at Horsepower Heritage. Also, go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage to support the show. And I'll see you back here in 2 weeks for more of the people and stories behind the machines. So until then, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.